10,000 years after the Great Heresy, the galaxy burns once again. By the twilight of the 41st millennium, Abaddon the Despoiler had sworn to crush the Imperium that he once helped build. The 13th Black Crusade, the greatest chaos incursion since the Horus Heresy, was well underway. Drawing upon 10 millennia of experience, the Warmaster made use of all his strength and guile to finally destroy the fortress world of Cadia. Confronting the threat head-on, General Ursarkar E. Creed pledged that his world would stand. Without supplies, speed and tactical brilliance are the only way to win, and you can train yourself in that right now with our sponsor War Thunder, the world's most comprehensive vehicle combat game, and it's free to play on PC and consoles or with a brand new mobile version available on iOS and Android, allowing you to take the battlefield to wherever you go. Come fight in massive PvP contests between 95 million players worldwide, piloting over 2,500 vehicles from the 1920s to today, with fully authentic models and sounds in full fidelity. And this isn't some simple tit-for-tat exchange of damage with hit points like an RPG. War Thunder's best feature is how it goes into extreme detail to both calculate and demonstrate the exact damage a shot will do to the target, factoring in all the physics and the characteristics of the projectiles and the materials. X-ray view is awesome for war buffs, as you'll see precisely where the shell penetrated, which components were affected, and what led to the destruction of the enemy vehicle. If the enemy has even the smallest weakness, you can put a shot right through it, and the game will make sure you know how glorious that is. If you haven't tried this yet or haven't played in 6 months on PC or console, then you can dive into the action with a massive bonus pack by using our link in the description or pinned comment. That'll give you 7 days of premium account for free, several premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator, and a load more bonuses. Just hit the link below and enter the war with a bang. After weathering the Despoiler's initial attack, General Creed's navy was at last prepared to strike back. And after mustering a massive fleet around Belis Corona, the time had come for the Emperor's faithful to respond and regain the ground they had ceded to the enemy. Creed's main goal was to relieve pressure from the dozens of worlds blockaded and besieged by the archenemy. While Imperial ground forces had held the line on many systems, the loss of void superiority had put them at a severe disadvantage. The fleet was put under the command of Admiral Khorne and divided into several small battle groups. Each had its own set of orders and targets for liberation. Armed to the teeth and carrying vital equipment and ammunition, they were welcomed with enthusiasm by dozens of beleaguered planets upon their arrival. Skelos was just such a planet. Thousands of guardsmen had bravely held the line for months and were now blockaded upon the surface. A plan was hastily hatched to extract them from their besieged world. The neighbouring system of Vermaard, recently conquered by Chaos, was thus targeted by the Imperial Navy. The goal was to create a diversion and draw as many enemy vessels as possible away from Skelos. The plan was, technically, a success. The blockade was weakened to the point where a large part of the garrison was successfully redeployed. Unfortunately, the forces that had assaulted Vermaard were slaughtered under overwhelming waves of Chaos reinforcements. The shrine world of Ibrium also became a key battleground. Erebus, Dark Apostle of the Wordbearers, turned the planet into his playground. In an attempt to emulate the great ruinstorm of the Horus Heresy, he built grand monuments to the Dark Gods and sacrificed the entire population in their honor. His reward was swiftly granted, as vast warp storms spread across the region, isolating worlds and severely damaging the Imperial counterattack. Following the fall of Ibrium, the Loyalists could only rely on severely corrupted and vague astropathic messages to coordinate a campaign across thousands of light years. Effective communication and planning were rendered almost impossible overnight. Scenes like these played out across the sector, as lives, ships and planets were traded daily, like pieces in a game of regicide. Yet despite Ursarkar Creed's abilities, the frailties of the unaugmented human mind soon began to hamper his grand counterattack. The Lord Castellan could not be everywhere at once. It soon became obvious that his subordinates were not up to the task. Though well trained, they were mere mortals, called upon to stem a blight as terrible as the Great Heresy. Despite Creed's insistence on maintaining momentum and pressing the advantage, more and more of his officers adopted a passive stance that merely delayed the inevitable. Soon enough, even Belis Corona was under threat from reaving Chaos vessels that had slipped through Imperial nets. Slowly but surely, the war was turning against an Imperium that was seemingly dying from 1,000 cuts. gargled astropathic messages soon reached General Creed, informing him that the Orcs had pressed their advantage in the Scarus sector. Their so-called Green Crusade had cut a swathe through the overwhelmed defenders, burning one world after the next. Every ship dedicated to the Chaos Front made the aliens' job easier. Their greatest triumph was the capture of the Forge world of Mordax, which the Greenskins promptly renamed MoreDakka. Despite the allocation of dozens of Guard and Skitarii regiments, the planet was lost. The right of Exterminatus was considered to stem the green tide, but the Red Priests of Mars vehemently opposed it. To the undying shame of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the vile Xenos were quick to turn the world's blessed machinery to their crude purposes. Soon, reports came of dozens of Gargants lumbering across the domain of the Omnissiah, while cackling Gretchins and brutish looters plundered millennia's worth of knowledge and data. The fall of Mordax was a devastating blow for Imperial logistics. Aside from the fact that it offered a solid base to a formidable foe, it also supplied vast quantities of materiel to the defenders. Its capture made the aliens stronger and the Imperium significantly weaker. To worsen the Lord Castellan's troubles, Imperial scouting vessels reported the presence of a colossal ship in an abandoned stretch of the sector. A single picked capture was enough to confirm Creed's fears. One of Abaddon's Blackstone fortresses had entered the fray. The forces of Chaos had hidden these ancient superweapons since the end of the 12th Black Crusade. Now the time had evidently come to unleash them once more. According to the Ordo Malleus and the Ordo Hereticus, the War Master had claimed 2 fortresses during the Gothic War. The whereabouts of the second one was anyone's guess. It was around this time that the siege of the Cadian system began in earnest, heralded by the Battle of Kasr, one of its distant frontier worlds. A fortress world of impeccable martial pedigree, Kasr was to Cadia what Cadia was to Terra, a bulwark against the coming darkness and the first line of defense against the Eye of Terror. For several days, Abaddon hurled millions of his lowest and most expendable servants against the walls of the Kasr. Wave after wave crashed upon the defences, only to be driven back with relative ease. Yet each attack consumed precious ammunition and supplies at a rate that troubled the defenders. Abaddon's intent soon became evident. Wear down the garrison through relentless human wave assaults and bleed them dry before committing his true elite. Only once the Loyalists had been sufficiently exhausted and their lines strained did the Black Legion finally make its move, descending upon the battlefield with all the wrath of fallen angels. Against all odds and reason, the Imperial Guard miraculously held, though their losses were simply unsustainable. After the initial assault, the traitors began alternating between waves of undisciplined rabble and devastating strikes by their Space Marines. Hundreds of brave guardsmen fell to every single heretic Astartes. Unless the Loyalists could break the deadlock, Kasr would fall to the brutal arithmetic of war. The situation had grown so dire that General Creed eventually transferred his headquarters to the planet itself. His arrival immediately bolstered the defenders' morale, and the Castellan wasted no time in orchestrating a risky strategy aimed at reversing Imperial fortunes on Kasr. Taking much inspiration from the exploits of the ancient Terran general Brasidas, Creed resolved to launch a daring sally of his own. Taking personal command of the garrison, he waited for Abaddon's cultists to hurl themselves at the walls once more. As soon as their assault had been driven back, Creed ordered an immediate sortie, striking out before the enemy Astartes had time to deploy. The counterattack caught the enemy entirely off guard. The Astra Militarum crashed into the heretic ranks, buying the Loyalists precious time and much-needed breathing room. As the traitor lines struggled to regroup, their fate was sealed by the arrival of unforeseen reinforcements striking into their rear. Seemingly out of nowhere, and for the second time in the war, the Wolfen of the 13th Great Company erupted onto the field. The carnage they unleashed was enough to make even an Astartes waver. In the aftermath of the slaughter, Kasr stood battered but unbroken. The world had been saved, at least for now. This unforeseen victory reinvigorated the Imperial war effort and averted the total collapse of the front. Yet it also highlighted how increasingly fragile the Cadian Gate had become. It was, therefore, a great relief to the Loyalists when a second wave of reinforcements translated into the sector, this time composed almost entirely of Adeptus Astartes. The Emperor's angels had come to wage war against the demons of the warp. It was up to Logan Grimnar, the Great Wolf, to coordinate the many marine chapters in their defense of the Cadian, Belis, Corona and Agripinaa sectors. This marked a notable escalation in the conflict, with Abaddon throwing everything he had at his disposal to counter his former battle brothers. Although every single chapter involved in the struggle fought with honor for the Emperor, the venerated Blood Angels distinguished themselves above all else. Their first action occurred on the world of Agripinaa, where one of the largest Khornite invasions ever recorded was underway. The Sons of the Blood had a long-standing feud with the followers of the Skull Throne. Ever since their Gene Father had clashed with the demon Ka'bandha, Khorne had shown great interest in the scions of the 9th Legion. Ever teetering between honor and heresy, the ancient gene flaws that haunted the blood of Sanguinius threatened constantly to undo his sons. 4 Blood Angels companies struck at the Chaos forces on Agripinaa. Their target was Kosolax the Forsworn, leader of the Khornite warband. The traitors, however, were ready. Well aware of the Blood Angels' reputation, Kosolax prepared a grand sacrifice, including thousands of his own cultists. From the torrential rivers of sacrificial gore, a mighty bloodthirster emerged, eager to claim Astartes' skulls in the name of his master. Though the beast took many lives that day, the actions of the Death Company and the sanguinary priest Numitor saw it banished in a desperate battle that saved the world. At the climax of the conflict, the greater demon lopped off Numitor's hand, spilling the precious blood of Sanguinius from the chalice he was holding. Upon witnessing such sacrilege, the maddened brothers of the Death Company were driven to even greater feats of rage. The bloodthirster was hacked to pieces, as were most of Kosolax's men. Not ones to sit on their laurels, the Blood Angels pressed on despite their casualties. Next on their list was the forge world of Amethal. Located in the Dimarov system, this vital supply node was also under attack from Khornite warbands. The heretics had set their sights upon a powerful artifact housed deep within it, called the Banshee Stone. Its destruction would open a massive rift between Dimarov and Cadia itself, dooming the Imperial war effort. The Battle of Amethal would prove to be one of the bloodiest of the entire war. Even before battle was joined, much of the 5th Company tragically succumbed to the Black Rage after a terrible psychic attack by the enemy. Weeping for their lost brothers, the Angels decided to make the best of the tragedy. Launching a massive drop pod assault, they trapped the traitors between the planet's garrison and their now feral battle brothers. Predictably, the heretic Astartes were cut to pieces, unable to withstand 10,000 years of repressed gene trauma they had so foolishly triggered. Khorne, however, was not satiated with the carnage. As the Death Company wiped the battlefield clean, a new enemy emerged. The Butcher Horde, an even larger World Eater force, translated into orbit. Led by Khan the Betrayer, the champion of Khorne himself, this force promised to escalate the violence to apocalyptic levels. The Berserkers launched themselves at the Death Company, who, though hopelessly outnumbered, responded in kind. Under the expert leadership of Chaplains Dana and Astoreth, the lost warriors of the Blood Angels were coaxed into a semblance of order. Orchestrating their attacks with the Titans of Legio Metallica, they inflicted horrendous casualties upon the Butcher Horde. Even so, numbers soon took their toll. Before long, more than 90% of the Death Company had been killed. At the height of the battle, Dana confronted the Betrayer in single combat, intent on dying with his lost flock. After a ferocious duel, the Chaplain was struck down, hacked nearly to death by one of the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever known. Only a final desperate push from the Legion Metallica broke the Butcher Horde and allowed the remnants of the Death Company to extract. Chaplain Dana, though grievously wounded, was rescued by Astoreth to fight another day. Ultimately, this preliminary engagement was counted as an Imperial success. The gene-cursed members of the Death Company were always sent to a glorious and merciful death once the Black Rage set in. As such, they had done their duty well and blunted one of the archenemy's greatest warbands. Even so, the Butcher Horde was far from done. Their patron god was ecstatic at the bloodbath, as Khorne cared not from whence the blood flowed. Amethal was still in mortal peril. Furthermore, unlike the Imperials, the heretics could count on fresh waves of reinforcements. The Blood Angels pressed on regardless, even receiving aid from the mythical Sanguinor in their hour of greatest need. A massive loyalist counterattack heralded the final climactic battle of Amethal. Charging through torrents of orbital bombardments and warp sorcery, the Blood Angels and their mortal allies closed the gap with their foes. Through great sacrifice, the Loyalists ultimately prevailed and drove the heretics back before the Banshee Stone could be fully destroyed. Even so, the planet had to be evacuated, as unnatural firestorms obliterated everything upon its surface. Though won at a great cost, the Battle of Amethal had ended in a Pyrrhic Imperial victory. Despite their legendary heroics, the Blood Angels were not alone. all across the theatre of war, countless chapters were fighting with all the fury of the Emperor's finest to ensure the survival of his realm. The Doom Eagles, pious and aloof, sent company after company to purge the plague zombies crawling through every Imperial hive. The Iron Hands, aided by the Imperial Fists, defended their homeworld for the second time since the 10th Black Crusade. The Harbingers were tasked with cleansing the remaining space hulks prowling the stars. The White Scars relieved countless sieges through their hit-and-run attacks. The newly founded subjugators paid a terrible price in lives, driving themselves almost to extinction in the Emperor's service. The Marines Exemplar, fighting in concert with the Space Wolves, lost their chaptermaster in desperate rearguard actions. The Howling Griffins and Iron Knights, respectively of Ultramarine and Imperial Fist stock, made their Genefathers proud upon the world of Amistal Majoris. Presenting a united front against the contagions of the Death Guard, they drove the Plague Marines from the planet at great personal cost. Had he lived to witness it, Rabute Guilliman might well have smiled to see that, even in the 41st millennium, the dauntless few remained indomitable. Across the entire theatre of war, the Emperor's angels were selling their lives as dearly as they could. On every world and every system, Astartes' blood was being shed, either in defense of the Imperium or in pursuit of its destruction. Founding chapters, with 10 millennia of battle honours, were fighting side by side with Astartes of unknown founding and unknown lineage. In the face of Armageddon, every angel was ready to die next to his brothers, no matter the colours they bore. Even the Space Wolves and Dark Angels, whose primarchs held a rivalry that had persisted through the ages, briefly set their differences aside. After an unforeseen mutant uprising on Cadia itself, Logan Grimnar and Supreme Grand Master Azrael joined forces. The first two founding chapters descended near Kasr, the scene of Creed's ascension, and commenced one of the most effective purging campaigns of the war. The mutant horde besieging the Kasr was brutally cut down. Throughout the slaughter, the warriors of both chapters competed with each other in a display of skill and daring. Frostblades and plasma weaponry tore the enemy to shreds. Wolfguard and Dreadwing Knights annihilated the enemy shoulder to shoulder. For the first time in ages, the Emperor's executioners and the Emperor's exterminators were fighting as brothers, as the Master of Mankind intended. By the time they were done, it was obvious that their combined forces were greater than the sum of their parts. Unfortunately, this lesson was lost on the proud warriors of both chapters, who resumed their dangerous enmity as soon as circumstances permitted. It was no secret that many Space Marines lamented the age they lived in, and looked back on the past with envy. Proud as they were of their own chapters, every Astartes yearned for days they had never known. An age when Space Marines fought as vast legions, tens of thousands strong. When chapters like theirs formed only the vanguard of an unstoppable Imperium. When demigods walked the stars and held the reins of the galaxy itself. An age where one's duty and sacrifice truly mattered. Most Space Marines could not help but feel lesser when measured against the legends who had served the Emperor so long ago. Yet, knowingly or not, as they gave their lives in the 13th Black Crusade, they were echoing the glorious and terrible deeds of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. No war in 10 millennia had come so close to matching the apocalyptic fury of the 31st millennium. No warrior, mortal or Astartes, had ever such a chance to prove himself the equal of his progenitors. And thanks again to our sponsor, War Thunder. Join endless epic battles for free right now and claim a massive bonus pack by using our link in the description or pinned comment. More epic and bloody tales from both Warhammer 40k and Fantasy are on the way. In the meantime, we're planning to cover the stories from many other fantasy and sci-fi universes, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.